South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is being praised for how he handled himself during President Trump's Oval Office meeting. Ramaphosa and his delegation visited the White House on Wednesday, hoping to stick to the topic of trade agreements. Instead, President Trump continued his practice of using the Oval Office news conferences as opportunities to try to intimidate or embarrass rather than welcome, show diplomacy. Trump brought out visual aids meant to back up his false claims that white South Africans, Afrikaners, the farmers there, are being persecuted. Ramaphosa, chief negotiator of the end of apartheid, kept his cool. Tensions between the two countries were high long before Ramaphosa arrived in Washington. In February, Trump issued an executive order freezing aid to South Africa over some of the same claims that he brought up this week. In March, Secretary of State Marco Rubio declared South Africa's ambassador to the U.S., Ibrahim Rasool, persona non grata and expelled him. Well, Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool joins me now from Cape Town. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being with me. I want to talk a little bit about this meeting in the Oval Office and then look ahead at the relationship between the U.S. and South Africa. First, President Ramaphosa said that it was not dramatic, but there are plenty of people who characterize it as an ambush of your president. What's your view of what happened at the Oval Office?
No, thank you very much. I think that the idea of an ambush is fairly accurate in the sense that you don't expect a president, you don't expect diplomacy from a superpower to descend into such a haranguing, hectoring, blustering engagement. And so in that regard, when you come there with a decent demeanor, you don't expect it. But I do think that I agree with those who say that the South African delegation led by President Ramaphosa was united, was focused, was diverse, covering all opinions, but it was most importantly dignified, and certainly the body language spoke as to who was the adult in the room and who was not.
I want to play for you a claim that the administration uses to defend its assertion that there is a genocide and there's persecution of white South Africans. Let's play that. This is from Elon Musk and also from a representative of the Department of Homeland Security.
There are now 140 laws in South Africa that give that basically give strong preference to if you're a black South African and not otherwise.
There's been over 140 laws enacted that are race-based and to discriminate against racial minorities.
Now, this claim appears to originate with the South African Institute for Race Relations, which has had some race-related controversies of their own over the last couple of years. But how do you defend against that claim that there are laws, 140 of them, that discriminate against white South Africans?
I think that if you consider the entire law book of apartheid, then amending 140 of them is tinkering with what apartheid meant for black people. If one of the laws says, give blacks more jobs, if one of the laws says, give blacks more opportunities in the economy, give them more ownership, give them more land, then those are 140 very few laws that try to overturn apartheid while keeping the edifice of reconciliation going with our former oppressors and supremacists in the white community. And so what they hold up as transformation laws of apartheid is in fact an indictment that we may have moved too little, too slowly in overturning the legacy of apartheid.
And so when Elon Musk says that he cannot get a Starlink contract in South Africa, although since the meeting there have been this progress to make exceptions for him to do that. And he says it's absurd that he, as a man born in South Africa, cannot get that. What's your response to him, who says that that is discriminatory?
What is different, for example, to what Mr. Trump says, then he says Arabs can come into the United States with their investments, but they will be required to make a partnership with American companies so that they build together. I think that what we are actually seeing is a very conventional approach by countries who want to be part of the growth of a company. And therefore, I think there are 600 American companies, and their experience is one of booming in South Africa, of thriving in South Africa, and of making enormous progress and profits in South Africa. And so I really think, judge it by the 600 American companies who are thriving versus one who is complaining simply because he's been asked to share ownership of his project with Black South Africans, which is no different to what Mr. Trump is saying to foreign investors who come in and who are asked to put up joint plants and manufacturing plants with Americans.
You talked about the need for South Africa to rebuild its relationship, repair its relationship with the United States without abandoning its values. And after your expulsion, President Ramaphosa named a special envoy to the United States to, quote, rebuild that relationship. His name is Mbisi Jonas. I want to play for everyone something that Mr. Jonas said. This was during a lecture, November of 2020. This is the man that President Ramaphosa has highlighted to rebuild the relationship with the United States.
Right now, the U.S. is undergoing a watershed moment, with Biden the certain winner in the presidential race against the racist, homophobe Donald Trump. How we got to a situation where a narcissistic right-winger took charge of the world's greatest economic and military powerhouse is something that we need to ponder over.
I mean, if you consider why you were expelled from the U.S., and this is the man who's supposed to repair the relationship, racist, homophobe, narcissistic right-winger, how is he the right person to rebuild?
You are not going to get a Black South African who suffered under apartheid, went to prison like the two of us, was persecuted and hounded into the underground, denying the evidence of their eyes. When we look at the United States today, and I called it supremacism, he called it all those kind of names, but the fact is that when a piece of wood has a hinge, it begins to look like a door. When it has a handle, it begins to smell like a door. And when it opens and closes, it is a door. And so I think it is a moment in which the latest victims globally of white supremacism and apartheid, when we recognize those kind of signs, we respond with a DNA of having been the last victims of supremacism in South Africa. And so I think we've got to get past that. We've got to be able to say that he has a business brain extraordinaire. He is able to keep his eye on the trade relations. He's been a successful person. He knows finances. And I think that that is what is going to be required. And I'm hoping that with Mr. Trump having had my blood, that they will be able now to get on, as I think they did in the Wednesday meeting, despite the bluster and the theater of the Oval Office. I think good talks were had on the basis of trade, even on Starlink. And I think that that's the foundation from which to repair the relationship.
Former South African ambassador to the United States, Ebrahim Rasool, thank you.